This will be an interesting one. I don't know if you want to get into it now. We can get into it now.
Yeah, you want to get started?
Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Welcome to the podcast, brother.
This is Losing Lost. I am the elder brother, Pierce Nahigyan.
I am the younger brother, Derek Hobson.
And today we are reviewing Season 1, Episode 17 of Lost in translation. The original The original air date of this episode was February 23rd, 2005. The writers were Javier Grillo-Marxuach and Leonard Dick. Grillo-Marxuach previously wrote House of the Rising Sun, a couple other episodes, and this is Dick's first episode of Lost, though not his last. And it was directed by Tucker Gates, who previously directed Confidence Man.
You know, I am finding that information might inform a lot of how I feel about this episode.
So I'm interested here because I haven't heard boo about this episode from you, which is unusual. Usually you give me like a little hint. You'll just be like, oh, have you seen the episode yet? It's a real we tend to reserve our, full thoughts and stuff for the podcast. So I am curious. I'm curious what you thought of this one.
So I would put it somewhere in the middle. I'd say the last 3 episodes we've watched have all kind of been in the middle for me. And I found that interesting because on reflection, there's a lot of great stuff in this episode. There's so much information. I like the flashback sequences. I think that there's high stakes in the island stuff and some great character interactions, and yet something just felt a little hollow. And
really?
Yeah, and I struggle a bit with what? I have an idea that there are 2 characters who, after this episode, I'm ready to write off as I don't care what happens to them.
Oh, no.
But I mentioned this because this episode had 2 things working against it. Number one, It's subtitled. And I made the mistake because I wanted to get in the habit of watching each episode twice. So I picked a day where I was extremely tired, and it was 1 a.m, and I thought, I'll just watch Lost and I'll finish that.
Why would you do that?
And I watched it, and I took my notes. I went to bed and told myself, you will rewatch this so that you can take more notes and really dive in deep here. And I didn't. So I have seen this once, and I was very tired. And that may have been part of why I feel it's a little hollow. I think the other thing is that as far as it's difficult to judge this episode because I like Jin, but I only like Jin because I know where the series goes. And I know that this episode, I honestly can't remember how I felt when I first watched it, but I have to imagine that it blew my mind because they took this guy who thus far has been an asshole, and made him an interesting and empathetic character. But I'm already on board with Jin, and I'm already off board with Sun. And all this episode does is further inform that, Sun sucks. And
I don't know if that. Well, I'll let you finish, and then
I find her to be extremely abusive, and not just to Jin, as I'm sure we'll get to very, very quickly. But how did you feel about this episode?
I really enjoyed this episode. I was really pleasantly surprised. I had remembered that the Jin episode that was the counterpart to the House of the Rising Sun was better than the House of the Rising Sun, but I wasn't quite sure what to think because you're right. The last couple episodes have been a little Although I liked Outlaws.
Again, I don't dislike Outlaws or Homecoming. I just mean that in terms of like, I don't know if it's because you planted in my brain that this is the latter half ordered.
Yeah.
But it does feel a little bit like the pacing has slowed.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I guess even you look at this episode where the island plot revolves around something that is a setback so that they can reserve it for the season finale.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's definitely a different vibe with these three. But anyway, sorry, continue.
I do like it quite a bit. I actually, I've started ranking the episodes as we view them, and I place this one above Outlaws and below All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. It puts it up at number 8 out of the 17 that we've watched. Counting Pilot is the parts 1 and 2 is 1. So the the thesis of this episode is marriage is hard. And and I sympathize with that. And I think the one thing I don't enjoy about the episode is that I don't think the episode makes any headway in showing us why Jin is so. I mean, I don't know if it's a cultural thing because I know very little about South Korea, but as much as I like this episode, I was still hoping that it would give some insight into why Jin is so unpleasant now. And it kind of does that by telling us that he feels like he needs to protect his wife and that he needs to both physically protect her, but also emotionally protect her from the monster that her father is. And that's why they stop talking. And that's why he becomes so much colder to her, because he feels like he can't share all of himself with her. But it still doesn't quite give me enough. But that aside, I enjoyed the insight it gave us into Jin. I thought all of the island stuff was really good.
I liked it too. Real quick. So because we count the pilot as 1, does that mean your list has 16? Because I think my list has 16.
17, I think.
Well, I'm missing something.
No, I'm sorry. I take that back. It is 16. It's because
okay.
I have a heading at the top of the chart, and that counts as.
Got it. Okay. Because we ranked this very similarly. We're in translations number 9 for me. I really think at the end we'll do I would like us to come to a consensus because I'm willing to cave on some of these, but I find it very interesting that except for me, All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues is number 1, but that's a. Anyway.
That's a tough one. I still count White Rabbit higher just because it's sort of like why I have Walkabout ranked as highly as I do, in that I actually think several of the episodes that I've ranked lower than Walkabout are better written episodes, but Walkabout is so fundamental to what it means to watch Lost, and that final twist at the end is so big that I feel like Walkabout deserves to be higher than everything else because it just completely reshapes what you think of the show.
Yeah.
In the same way, I feel like White Rabbit, that insight that it gives us into Jack, that emotional gut punch of him finding the coffin and destroying it at the end is so powerful that even though I think All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues is, again, a better written episode, White Rabbit affected me more emotionally than Cowboys. But I don't know. My thoughts on that might change.
All right. Well, now that's out of the way. To your point about Jin and how he became so cold to Sun, this is the one thing that I did take away because, as with All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, there's a lot of daddy issues in this episode. And I get the impression, and I think there's enough evidence to suggest it, that Jin became cold to Sun because he resents her. I think that he resents her not just because she comes from wealth, but because Jin was so ashamed of his father that he lied about him being alive. And Sun is so ignorant of her father when she should be ashamed.
Mm.
And so I think he's mad at himself for having lied that his dad is dead. And I think that's why they hit you with that stinger in his final flashback. But I think that's why he grows increasingly cold towards Sun when she's like, "Oh my God, what did you do?" And he's like, "I do whatever your dad tells me to do." Like, it's through such grit teeth that it's like, you should be ashamed. Why didn't you tell me your dad was dead? Like, like, and it makes him, as with all things marriage related, like, he's mad at himself that he was so ashamed when he's like, oh my God, my dad was so awesome compared to this guy.
What I had forgotten was I assumed at the beginning of, because I remembered that his dad was still alive, but I thought that he was keeping that a secret because somehow that would be more shameful to have his father, who's a fisherman, involved in the wedding or, meeting Sun's father. I didn't realize until the end when he says, it's like, it was all Jin's doing. Like, he decided he was not going to acknowledge his father because he was ashamed of him. And it's a really beautiful moment at the end where he formally apologizes to his father and says, I am sorry that I was ashamed of you. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. You are a good man. And now I understand what a bad son I've been and what shitty choices I've made in my life that have led me to here.
Yeah, and this episode, certainly more so than the previous episodes where it was hard to tell, does Sun know or not what her daddy does. This one where Jin's like, I gotta finish this thing for your dad, and she's like, a car company can wait. And it's like, you have no idea. Like, and it just, yeah, I can imagine that. I think it's a lot of resentment, but also a lot of shame.
Yeah. To your point, this episode does definitively answer, does Sun know what her dad does? And the answer is no. No, she does not.
Or she has the willful blinders, like Nick Frost in Hot Fuzz. Like, it's my dad. It's like, he's killing people. Yeah, no, but I think, at least based on this episode, I think we are supposed to believe that she has no idea that her dad is, what would you even call that? Mafia?
I don't even know, at least from what we know in this episode, it's not that he's some kind of a gangster per se. He's just an extremely corrupt businessman who is very comfortable ordering the death of a Secretary of Energy. What
is that? I was so unclear. I was probably because I was tired. I was so unclear what the guy did.
Yeah, no, he's what it seems to be a very high-ranking member of the government. One thing that this does remind me of, though, is that there was a YouTube video recently called South Korea is a Cyberpunk Dystopia. It came out in February 2023, and the YouTuber who created it is named Quinn Henry. In the 1980s, the idea of Japan being this cyberpunk exotic land was all the rage. And if you look at Japan now, it's basically like any other country. Like, they have some, a couple things that are maybe a little bit more technologically advanced, but that whole idea of like the very 1980s chic cyberpunk is gone. Whereas they argued that actually South Korea is way more of a cyberpunk place because there's like Samsung is this mega corporation that employs like something like a third of the population. I'm sure it's not that high, but it's something crazy. And like, the more stuff they got into, the more they talked about how the country, their entertainment and their job prospects and their extremely rigorous schools call to mind all of those cyberpunk tropes that come from the 80s and the early 90s. So given all of that, and again, my general ignorance on South Korea, I get the impression that Mr. Paik, I want to say Mr. Pak,
I don't know.
that yes, he is the head of a car corporation, but I think the idea is supposed to be that he's not the head of like a small car company. He's the head of like an international conglomerate, and he has more power than his own government. But again, I wrote this note on the side of my notes, which is, I know nothing about the culture of South Korea. How accurate is this depiction of class? and corporate warfare?
That
Like, is it all artistic license, or is this based on any bit of reality whatsoever?
it was something that I was like, in 2023, is there a little bit of, I don't know what, this isn't the right word for it. Like, I almost wanted to call it white culture washing or something, because it's just the acting, the mannerisms, the jokes, the nuances and gestures. I'm like, all of this feels very American to me. But then, yeah, I don't know. I did feel like maybe that, I don't know. You know what? We don't have to talk about it.
I think it's a good episode. I think it's well directed.
It is, but you don't feel, because again, like I think Outlaws and Homecoming are also good episodes, but I would also put them in like the middle tier, because I'm like, there's just something about these that it's no whatever the case may be, or House of the Rising Sun, but it's, I don't know. It could have, maybe I was just tired. No, because again, like I do feel like it's these last three that.
Well, I'll give you my reasons for why I think it's good.
Okay.
Number one, the flashbacks give us so much more insight into Jin that it almost turns him into a new character. It reveals the reasons for his behavior that we saw in Sun's flashback, which means that we get more information about his character than we had before. And it's almost like every single flashback is almost like a twist on Sun's, because it's like, yeah, this is why he did that. Like the fact that we have the same scene where he's washing his hands of the blood and he still delivers the line, "I do whatever your father tells me," but then she leaves and we see him just break down crying in the mirror. Like, that's huge. Like, that's having that bookend. So on top of that, number two, we have a change of the status quo, which is that Jin and Sun are effectively separated at the end of this episode, which is big. We have the torching of the raft, which goes from just a run-of-the-mill conflict in the episode to a threat that the others are still stalking them, to the reveal that Walt did it and Locke totally knows that he did it. But really, Derek, the most important thing about this episode is that Shannon and Saeed get down and dirty. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Saeed and Shannon officially become a couple in this episode, and it's beautiful, and Shannon has the sexiest line of dialogue in this show so far, and oh my god, my jaw hit the floor when that came out, and I was like, okay, I am 100% on board with Shannon.
And also Naveen Andrews' reaction of being like straight faced and then kind of like, are we? Oh, okay. It's just like he has this very like he broke in that moment of like I was being a gentleman. I was courting you, and you're going there.
You're going.
We're going.
Yeah, that face that he makes, where it's so good. I feel like. And I know we've said this before, but I feel like Naveen Andrews gets very, very serious towards the latter half of the show. And the fact that, like, he could have gone, like, he wouldn't go, like, a big emotion. But the fact that it's this very, just that the way that he breaks, the way that he smiles, he's like, oh, wow, are we, okay, so you and me are going to end the rope. And suddenly this island seems a lot nicer to me. Yeah, And more reasons why this is good. We get the final Hurley music montage. Until I don't remember if he gets more batteries at some point, but I feel like that was important.
Oh, you know what? I think he does when like they get a shipment and it's like, hey guys, remember when things were all right? I think he does in like end of season or near the end of season 2. Yeah, no, I hear you. I think all those things are awesome. It might have been I was tired. I mean.
I mean, the actual biggest thing about this episode is the fact that Sun reveals to everybody that she speaks English.
Yeah, and just kind of glosses over it so that they don't have to do that scene yet. Which is fair, because she's yelling at, it's in the middle of a heated argument. But I do like how people are like, excuse me? Anyway.
And her monologue to him at the end, half in English, half in Korean, I think is very good. Her confessing that she was going to leave him, then he made her change her mind. I thought it was very beautiful. And then having that moment split with that final flashback to show that all of the things that she hates about what their marriage has become are the things that he hates about what their marriage has become, but he still says that it's too late. And does he say that it's too late because he really thinks that? Does he say that it's too late because he's upset with her for lying to him? Or does he say that it's too late to start from the beginning because they need to start over, basically, or they need to start this new chapter?
It's because they weren't speaking the same language even when they were married.
Bomb. I'm just gonna put the thud in there, and we're out. That's it.
No, and I would call Son a coward, but it's
I don't think that's fair. She
did it in English because she knows he doesn't understand.
She was living with an abuser. Is basically
she's an abuser.
No.
Yes.
In all seriousness,
yes.
Jin never hit Son, but his behavior and his actions terrified her. She was in a state of emotional terror. And from everything that we see in House of the Rising Sun, just by going off of that episode, she absolutely was justified in learning English so that she could escape him. Because as far as she knew, she met this sweet guy who seemed like a sweet guy. They were in love, and then there was a turn, and she no longer feels safe in her own home. She's so scared of what this guy's going to do, and she just wants to get away. So I don't blame Sun for anything that she's done. I do think she gets a little wishy-washy with, because Kate knows she speaks English and Michael knows she speaks English, and I don't know. That's the thing. She talks to them, not her husband, who seems like a conversation could have cleared a lot of this up, which is on him as well. But I was curious, that scene where where Kate and Sun are in the tent, and it looks like, I don't know, are they folding laundry or something? And I was thinking, like, Jin's obviously not catching fish at this hour. What does he think Sun's doing?
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, and I'm realizing, there's a ton of footage of Jin manhandling Sun, which is, to me, I don't feel that is justified. That feels wrong.
Well, that's why I mean, once again, I'm in the bag for Michael, and the fact that he runs up, he's the only one of all of the people on the beach who are just like, oh, they're fighting again. And Michael's like, no, fuck this. Do not touch her like that. That is not okay. Yeah, I think that.
And then Sun slaps him, and stereotypical abusive guy is like, oh, I did it to protect you, honey. And it's like, Sun, you just, no. Anyway.
I see where she's coming from with that, though, because as far as she knows, Jin murders people. And so and he's already suspicious of her and Michael. And so.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, you, as with all things, if you role reverse something like that, I'm sorry, baby. I did that to protect you. Anyway, I don't like Sun. But I agree. Just so it's clear, I don't think that Jin, the past 16 episodes, manhandling Sun, is okay.
Yeah.
And again, it's not justified. But we can get into it.
All right. Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So we start on Jin's eye as he gazes out at the beach and begin immediately with a flashback. We cut to Jin asking Mr. Pak for permission to marry his daughter. I felt like a lot of the flashback scenes, everybody was dubbed over. I don't know if that's because they needed to get the dialogue right for Daniel Day Kim or what was it. But I felt like the only scene that I can remember that seemed like it wasn't dubbed was the last one with him and his dad. But I have no production insight into why that might have been.
No, I don't know. I will say, do you think that this scene, which, first of all, I love that the set dressing of it looks like a wealthy establishment.
Oh my God! Yeah, that office is crazy.
Yeah. And I only mention it because I know you mentioned how they turned a library into an airport, and I don't know what they used to make that building look as glamorous as it was, but I was like, yeah, I get it. um,
But it's funny that
um,
I think it's a conference center that they turned into the airport. But
oh,
it's funny that on the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, they have a restaurant that they go to a lot, and if I'm remembering correctly, the set that they use for the restaurant is actually like the lobby of a hotel. And so looking at this office for Mr. Pack, I was like, this area is so big. I wonder if this is even actually an office in real life, or if this is just like I don't know, it's like a room out of like the Crystal Cathedral or something.
I wonder too if this scene is meant as a sort of bait and switch. Again, in trying to think of this as though for the first time, I was like, are we supposed to think that Mr. Pack is taking Jin under his wing? Like, oh, you grew up without a father? I could help you with that.
I I don't know if it's meant to be more like that, or it's more we're supposed to see him looking at Jin and realizing this guy will do anything for his daughter. He has no family. He comes from nothing. I can do whatever I want with him, and he'll just accept it. That's the read I got on this guy, who just oozes sleaze. Like he just like he narrows those eyes, and he's just like, I've got one. He tells Mr. Pack that he hopes to own his own restaurant in a hotel someday, and that his father is dead. We will learn this is a lie. And he says he'll do anything for his daughter, even work for Mr. Pack. And he's got a good line there about it. He's like, why would I give my daughter to someone who would sell his dreams? And he's like, well, she is my dream. And yeah, I think it's supposed to be, at first, we're supposed to look at this and say, oh, he was touched by that. But I think it's more him looking at me like, this fucking guy. I can. So we go back to the beach, and Jin sees Sun in a bikini and tries to cover her up. And so uncomfortable. It's very hard to watch. They show all the losties watching this. They do a good job depicting how uncomfortable this is and how used to it they are. Like Jack even says, there they go again. And once again, Michael does the only decent thing and he's clearly like was coming from somewhere else and sees this going on. And he's like, what the hell is wrong with all you people? Like, this isn't okay. And like even Claire, like she was telling Charlie, she's like, shouldn't we do something? And Charlie, benefit of the doubt, I think what Charlie is telling to Claire by not getting involved is like, look, we don't speak their language and this is their relationship. You know, maybe this is the way that it's supposed to be. But I absolutely agree with Michael in that I wanted to see that stopped, and he goes to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even, an even more nihilistic viewing is Jin is the guy bringing them meat, and they don't want to put a chokehold on that food supply.
Ugh. Yeah. Sun slaps Michael, and he's shocked, and the couple leaves together. Meanwhile, in the caves, while gazing at her father's watch, Jin asks what's going on between her and Michael. She says, nothing. Why? Why do you think that?
And I wrote here when she says nothing, oh, son, you have no idea how right you are. Because nothing will happen.
Oh, man. We flash back to their wedding day. We see the affection they still have for each other. Sun says she wishes Jin's father had lived to see their wedding, and he shows remorse, shame, who knows. And I just want to say, I'm glad there's no line about it being bad luck for the groom to see the bride beforehand. I don't know if that's just not a superstition in South Korea, but it is such a tired thing. Like there are two things I hate in romantic comedies. Number two is the bride being like, it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. It's just like, no. We've all moved past the superstition. Nobody cares. If you've been, anyway, the number one thing that I hate in romantic comedies is when the couple get in the bathtub together with their clothes on. I hate that. I hate seeing it. I think there are so many movies that do this, and it's such shorthand for being like, look how in love they are. He doesn't even care that he's getting his suit wet. He's just going to get in the bathtub with her. It's like, I fucking hate this.
I'm halfway on board because I do hate it whenever in whether it's a movie, a TV show, or whatever, when people make a mess, knowing that it's like, who is cleaning this up? Like I. But with regards to getting into the bathtub, you still got to see Two Mules for Sister Sarah, featuring Clint Eastwood. Got the best bathtub sequence, and it works.
But that's my problem, is that, so that movie probably came out in what, the 1970s?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
maybe earlier.
And that's fine. But it has become such a trope at this point that anytime I see a movie do it, I instantly distrust it, because we've seen it so many times before that it's no longer a cute thing in your movie. It's just a cute thing you've seen in other movies. I think you know about this. I think I've ranted about this to you before, but I think it's either Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, where they have done zero of the work to show us why Lois Lane and Superman are a couple. It's just they're a couple because Lois Lane and Superman are a couple, and that's what everybody knows. And there's no reason. There's no reason why Amy Adams would get together with this sulking, brooding, horrible, scary Ubermensch. And so I think it's in Batman v Superman where they get in the bathtub together. And Zack Snyder can direct a beautiful scene, but he can't actually put characters together. And I just hate it. I hate it so much. I'm like, you didn't do the work to show us Clark Kent and Lois Lane getting in a bath together. You just want to show us a pretty scene of them being in a.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. It was literally in my mind. I was playing this, and I'm like, yeah, that's the one where it's like, this doesn't make any sense.
No, all he does is endanger her life. Just a big mean baby. So anyway, I'm glad they didn't say that. Back on the beach, Sun goes to Michael and apologizes, says she was protecting him. Michael's made great progress on the raft, unfortunately. And Michael very much is just like, look, that's your business, okay? I don't even know why I got involved. You want to have your dysfunctional relationship? That's fine. Get away from me.
Yeah, no, I mean, in this case, Michael takes the high road.
He does. We have Jin hitting rocks at the golf course, very frustrated. And God bless Hurley. God bless this big, sweet teddy bear of a man who I don't think anybody on this island has any warm feelings towards Jin whatsoever. And Hurley, because he is a decent, caring human being, can see that Jin is upset and hurting and alone, and brings him some fishing rods and said, dude, let's go fish together. Come on. And Jin gives him a firm no. And Hurley just...
Yeah, I will say this, especially on a rewatch. Hurley, pretty much from the jump, has been a ray of sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
Gives everyone a chance. I adore him. And he's not afraid to cross that language barrier, which obviously so many people are. Because we even saw that in an early episode when he tries to learn how to catch a fish and make amends.
Yeah, and I feel like this was very much a follow-up to that moment. And I forget what episode that was. That House of the Rising Sun? But yes, so that whole thing between them, like, Hurley went from thinking this guy hates him to trying to make amends, and then they shared the moment where he tried to get Jin to pee on him. And yeah, it was a nice callback to that, to show that, yeah, these guys have a little bit of a bond. Like, it's not a friendship, but it matters. Like, something that happened in a previous episode still matters to these two characters.
Yeah, and I will say that that's something that I'll harken back to in terms of why I do like episodes like this, because as you said, any episode where retroactively it makes a previous episode or a previous scene better, it's exciting. It's not just Hurley, oh, everyone loves Hurley. It's, yeah, we have a history. Like, we've done something like this before.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So Shannon is good at tying knots. Saeed flirts with her, and she gives him one of the sexiest damn pickup lines I've ever heard. It's it's funny when you can hear a line that there is nothing, from a literal standpoint, there is nothing explicit. You can say all of those words on television. There is nothing wrong with any of those words. But the implication and her look given to him is, I think we've given a little bit of credit to Maggie Grace before this episode, but hats off to making that like, it's frisky, it's fun, it's sexy, it's and Saeed's reaction is just mwah.
Yeah, absolutely glorious.
We see Michael and Walt on the raft. Michael tells Walt that he's looking forward to showing him New York. Walt says, fuck that noise. No, Walt says, yeah. He says, yeah, I guess that'll be fun.
I wrote it down to myself that I'm like, they fully embraced Michael and redeemed him and given him purpose. And now we're on the other side of things where it's like, God, Walt, you kind of suck.
He's doing the best he can. Michael, not Walt. Michael tells Jack that he has room for just 4 on the raft, and 3 spots are already taken. Michael and Walt, obviously. And Jack's like, well, who's the other one? And Sawyer shows up, and he bought himself a ticket with all of his stuff.
Sawyer is channeling Kramer. Because this is far from the first time we've had a scene where Jack is walking up to someone and says, oh, you got something going on? Who could be responsible? And Sawyer walks in and goes, hello! And he's always taking people's stuff. But yeah, like when Sawyer takes Jack's spot at the beach.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what this was like. I was like, why have I seen this before?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
Jack
and
Jack hates. Like I think hate's too strong a word, but this taste Jack has for Sawyer is so great. And it's the only thing I wish I could have seen this episode is it's very clear that Jack has reservations about Sawyer being on the raft. But at the same time, there should have been just a little moment with Jack reflecting on the fact that if Sawyer gets on this raft, it means that he is leaving the island. And that should just thrill Jack for multiple reasons.
Yeah, but I think he's also like, oh, God, this guy is like, I'm going to get a phone is going to fall on the island. And he's going to be like, hey, Doc, I'm willing to pick you up if you're willing to settle for something. It's like, oh, man. Yeah, but no, I do love that, and I love Sawyer, just always the opportunist.
That night, Kate and Sun are talking. Kate asks how long Sun will let Jin treat her like that. Sun says that he wasn't always like this. We get a nice quick shot of someone like running past Kate really fast before we start hearing the commotion, and they find that the raft is on fire. People are trying to put it out. Michael is understandably freaked out. He asks, where's Jin? And something that I only noticed on rewatch, because I did watch this episode twice, is that it's only when Michael starts furiously interrogating Sun about where Jin is that Walt starts trying to put the fire out. Like he very much catches on to, oh my God, my dad is really upset at this guy and he might hurt him. I need to put this fire out. This is not what I wanted.
Oh.
And then Michael grabs him and like pulls him back because he doesn't want him near the fire.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, completely missed that the first time.
Yeah, no, and I didn't see that at all.
Well, because when I first watched the episode, I remembered that it gets revealed later that Locke is the one who set the fire.
No, Locke blows up the submarine.
No, I shoot the bus driver. But no, I thought it was because there's a moment, and I don't know when it happens, either first season or second season, when Locke, I think he tells Saeed, he's like, why do you think that I broke your triangulator thing? He confesses to knocking out Saeed. And I thought that for some reason that confession and this confession, he confesses them both. He's like, I burned down the raft, I knocked out Saeed, I don't think we should leave this island. But no, Locke had nothing to do with torching the raft. He knew it was Walt and he stuck up for him.
Well, he Ozymandias'd him.
All right, we'll get to that when we get to that, I guess. Jack says that they don't know who set the fire, And both Sawyer and Charlie are on Michael's side. Sawyer says, "Are you serious?" Like, they are so convinced that Jin would do this. And I don't know if this seems realistic, but it certainly establishes in this episode that nobody really likes Jin. Nobody likes the way that he treats Sun. And it's clear that they're just like, yeah, fuck that guy. And Sawyer alludes to this later on when he says that, a month ago people were doctors and accountants and whatnot, but now it's Lord of the Flies time. And we are seeing a little bit of that. And I think at the end when Hurley's Discman cuts out, it's a little hint of that as well, that the Losties have now been on the island for, I think, longer than 30 days. And it is now very clear that rescue's not coming. There's also, and I love the little background details of like Shannon setting up her encampment. They're starting to put together real permanent shelters because they know now that they live here. And people are freaking out. So this whole fracas about let's find Jin and let's bring him to justice, it feels more desperate and it feels more dangerous than it did in previous episodes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think you look at episode 1 where they're trying to compassionately save a marshal. Mm-hmm. And you see where things have wound up, where it started kind of behind closed doors, where only Jack and Saeed are torturing Sawyer. You get Charlie, who's likely never held a gun before, put 5 bullet holes in Ethan, who Ethan has killed several of their members and abducted one of their own, to a point where, like, yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that scene, but it very much was Lord of the Flies. They're like, yeah, let's let this like lynching occur, and it's like,
yeah,
fine. It's dark.
As realistic as I think that is, one of the things that does bother me towards the end of the episode is when they do bring Jin to the beach and Jack tries to stop the two of them from fighting, and Saeed of all people says, no, let them settle this. And it seems out of character for Jack to just let that happen. Like,
yeah.
If some people had actually like held him back, that would be one thing. But instead, he just looks really uncomfortable. That didn't seem right to me. I don't buy that. I don't buy that Jack would just let two men start beating the shit out of each other over something that they don't even know the facts about.
Frankly, I was also just wary about the fact that, yeah, Saeed is given that line of dialogue. I'm like, that doesn't feel like something he'd say.
No, it seemed seemed weirdly out of character.
All that said, piggybacking off of your comment earlier about how much disdain Jack has for Sawyer, I really liked in this scene when the boat is on fire and Sawyer is saying, like, get Jen! Jack, in the midst of trying to calm people down, has enough space to say, Sawyer, shut up! And moves on.
He doesn't like that Sawyer guy. In the caves, Jin is looking for medicine for his burns, and Sun finds him, and she is convinced that he did do it. We get a flashback. Pac promotes Jin to his special assistant. Yikes. And then immediately gets him to threaten the Secretary of Environmental Safety. And Jin thinks that he's just supposed to tell the Secretary that Pac is displeased. Like, he seems very, well, here I am, and I just want you to know that Mr. Pac, he's not happy with you. And this guy, he goes from super condescending to terrified in an instant once he finds out, who Jin works for, and thanks him and gives him his little girl's dog. And Jin is so confused by this whole interaction. He's just like, don't make me take this dog from your little girl. And he's like, you have to.
I do love this whole sort of comedic angle. Because I have a message from Mr. Pac. Please, not in front of my daughter. It's like, so the flashback starts with Jin apologizing for some sort of financial thing going awry. Like he lost money or something on this, wherever he's working. And Mr. Pac says not to worry about it, and then offers him a promotion, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Is he offering him a promotion, or is this his way of saying you messed up, therefore you're being demoted?
No, I think what this all is that this is always his plan with Jin, is that he knew he would have a guy who couldn't refuse him. And I also think that it shows that because the thing that he's apologizing about, like there was an accident or something, right? Like, and I think it shows that Pac doesn't actually care about his worker safety. He doesn't care about regulations. He just cares about making money. So it's very much sort of like, what? I don't care all that stuff. I need you to go beat somebody up. That's what I hired you for. That's why I've got you under my thumb because you love my daughter so much or whatever. And I don't think it's punishment. I think this was always his plan, was to make him a quote unquote special assistant. Back on the island, Saeed does the polite thing and tells Boone that he and her sister may become more than friends. And Boone tells Saeed that his sister sucks and she's just using him for something and not to take it personally. And I've written, since becoming Locke's disciple, he's become no fun at all. He's become a real jerk.
A real stick in the mud.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't totally get it.
I mean, this is perfectly in character for him. Like, we know that even though he had his whole vision quest of seeing Shannon die, that he still thinks that she's manipulative. And as long as she's not sleeping with him, he's not a happy boy. So
that makes sense. I thought that he's become so much more neutral since his vision quest. I assumed that when Locke told him, yeah, maybe you ought to let your sister go, he would, but as we've seen in the episode since, yeah, he's just more open to just being cruel to her.
Yeah, well, and he's also, he's pulling knives on Michael. He's letting his hair grow. He's got this whole scruff thing going on. He just seems more grody and aggressive, and yeah. Jin wakes up alone in the jungle, and as he's washing his hands in the river, Sawyer kicks him in the face. Later on, Saeed acts weird with Shannon, and she knows that he's talked to her brother. And she goes to find Locke and asks where his jungle pal Boone is. And I really enjoyed this little moment from Locke. I was expecting him to be cruel to her, and instead he gave her excellent advice. He said that everyone gets a new life on this island, and says that her liking Saeed has nothing to do with Boone. So just get over it.
I also do like his little quip there, though. Should I be writing this down?
We get Sawyer threatening Jin with Lord of the Flies time, and then we move into our next flashback with Sun making a big meal for Jin, but he gets a call, and he gets a call again, and Pac's factory has been closed. He tells Jin to drive his associate, a man in a white suit, who is credited in the credits as White Suit, to go to the secretary. And this guy's just going to straight up murder the Secretary of Energy, or the Secretary of Energy Safety. This escalates so quickly. Like, I get it's a TV show, but the whole time I'm like, I don't know. I don't care how powerful Mr. Pac is. If the day after your factory is shut down, the secretary is found in his home shot in the head, what you're telling me is that either South Korea is so corrupt that we're expected to believe everyone's going to look the other way, or you are amplifying the stakes so high up. Because what is this supposed to show us? What it's supposed to show us is that Jin beats this man savagely in order to prevent him from being killed. And it's sort of, you're trying to show us the other side of Sun's flashback and to say, well, yes, he came home with blood on his hands, but he actually saved a man's life by doing that. But it's also, you have to show us that because the only thing that is worse than a savage beating in your own home in front of your wife and child is being assassinated. So I like it in terms of showing us, that little twist on what we thought we knew about Jin. But I think this kind of falls apart when you question it even a little bit.
But I also like that it's the whole metaphor of being lost in translation, because Mr. Pac asks him to send a message, and then Jin picks up on nonverbal cues to understand. Like, I think, truthfully, this almost feels like this should have been a Damon Lindelof thing, but It's they have to have white suit so that we understand, oh, this is what he meant by send a message without having to communicate it.
You know what? You are correct. And I also just realized with you saying that Jin is wearing black and the other man's wearing white. And it's the black and white motif again. And Jin, the one who is in black, is the good guy. And the man in the white is the bad guy. Subversion. Subversion of expectations.
Which, yeah, why would you wear white? Like, forget the gloves.
Right?
You would be in a red suit.
So yeah, this is a scene that I initially liked a lot, and then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is a little silly.
Because the guy in the white suit is even just standing there in the doorway after it's done, just like, there's a man in your home holding a gun.
I was fully expecting him to like watch Jin leave, shrug, and then walk over and still shoot the secretary. It'd be like, I had a job to do when I came over here. I don't know why you had to torture him first before I did it, but whatever. Doing my job.
Yeah, you would think that he would even be like, well, I was told to send a message. I mean, does this count? Or, like, I don't want someone to then send me a message. And
so then we get, as we spoke about before, the scene, and then we have the not just the scene of him washing his hands, but the scene after, the part that Sun didn't see, where he cries in the mirror, and it's very sad. Back on the island, Sawyer brings Jin for judgment, and the way that they show how Jin hears everybody's English is by playing the English backwards, which I think is a really effective way to show, what he hears. So yeah, as we just spoke about like just minutes ago, the fact that Jack tries to stop the fight and then is fine with everyone telling him that this is between them seems very out of character, and even more out of character is Saeed being like, no, let them figure this out themselves. It's like, Saeed, really? You exiled yourself because you made a bad call in terms of fighting another person on this island, and this guy can't even speak the language. It seems like of anybody, Saeed would be the one to say, we do not have the facts here. This is not okay at all.
And especially because from that torture episode, given the surrounding evidence, they made a decision and it was the bad call. And yes, it looks to be a certain way, but yeah, of all people, Saeed is the one who would be like, I did this once before.
It seems like it should have been a line. It should have been a Sawyer line, but
yeah,
maybe Saeed didn't have enough dialogue in this episode and they had to give him something. I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't seem like something he would say.
No, and that's the thing. Like, yeah, it almost seems like someone who maybe had less understanding of Saeed's character is like, oh, he's a military guy, so they probably get into scraps all the time, and it's like, no, not. Nice try.
Sun interrupts, revealing that she can speak English, and Jin registers a dull shock. He's just staring at her, and I wish we had a little bit more. And I get that his whole character is that he's stone-faced and cold, and I think Daniel Day Kim does what he can with the material. The script asks him to be very stoic most of the time, and he does well with that, but I still wish we had just a little bit of something of him confessing to somebody or saying to somebody how he feels to learn that his wife can fluently speak a language that he had no idea about. And it's the trap of, yes, you get to show how isolated he is from everyone because nobody speaks his language, but he has nobody to talk to except for Sun.
I think this is actually justified within the episode because the flashback not prior to this, I think it's 2 ago, Sun makes him the dinner and he comes in and says, oh, you learned how to cook?
And it's like more that he was excited about the meal that she made.
Maybe. But I was under the impression that he's like, oh, this is what she's been up to since I've been working so late. And frankly, I think if Sun is picking up another language, I don't actually think that would surprise him all that much. He'd be like, okay. If anything, I'd be more like, you can speak English and you were going to let me get savaged here? Which is, again, this whole scene, and granted, I did not catch what you said about Walt earlier, but this scene, out of all the characters making bad decisions, This one just made me write off Sun and Walt entirely because it's like both of these characters hold the keys and they're just letting it happen. More so than even like the other characters. They're just staying around being like, fight, fight, fight. You know, like
I will defend Sun on this. It's because I think she says as much in a previous episode, but for her to reveal that she speaks English would make her and Jin's life so much more convenient. But it would shame him because this whole time he would feel like she was making a fool of him. She finally breaks her silence because she knows that things are getting very bad. Things are getting violent, and the whole island is perfectly fine with, like you said, lynching this guy. So, yeah, I think it's justified. I still think that there are definitely questionable things about her character, but I'll defend her on that one.
All right.
If you must. So Sawyer says that they can't trust Sun because it's clear that even Jin didn't know she spoke English. And Locke comes in to remind everyone that there are other people on this island that have attacked and murdered the survivors. And everyone kind of just accepts this. It's like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And it all just kind of breaks up. And Jin walks away from Sun. And Sun is left alone. Everyone feeling very weird about this. I feel like it's a recurring thing in this episode on the island is that everyone just feels very weird about their relationship, and this actually makes them feel weirder. Like, they do not feel close to her because of this.
If anything, they're all probably just going back in their heads of like, what did I say? Oh, God, did I say that thing? Or when she was in earshot?
Yeah, exactly. Michael laments the destruction of his raft and then apologizes to Walt for losing his temper. He does a really good dad speech here. He says that, we all have setbacks in life and they're going to try again. And I liked it.
Yeah. Michael's doing good.
Yeah, I thought he comes off well in this episode. At the caves, Jin packs up his stuff. Sun asks him when do they stop talking. Oh boy. That's anyway, she gives a good speech in English, telling him how she was going to leave him, and she says she wants to go back to the beginning. We get our last flashback here of Jin visiting his father, and we've already spoken about this, but this scene in particular really reminds me of how much this episode, on my initial viewing, changed my mind about Jin, because we've had, 16 episodes of this guy just being a prick. Like, really being unpleasant, traditional in a way that is strange to at least my Western eyes. We have this very sympathetic figure in Sun who is constantly under her husband's watch and isn't allowed to express herself, who felt the need to learn English to escape from him. And what this episode does for somebody who's watching the show for the very first time is show you there is a person here. This is a guy who feels absolutely terrible about the person that he's become and feels like he's made wrong decision after wrong decision. The only thing that he really trusts in is his own love for his wife. And in this episode, he feels utterly betrayed by her. So I think regardless of how I judge this episode now, in retrospect, it is a very important episode in terms of a first watch because it really pulls back the curtain on this guy to say, we don't know the whole story.
That's the thing that I really liked about that is the button flashback is up until that point, it is like we're getting the second half of House of the Rising Sun, getting a little bit more context. But yeah, this one implies there's a ton more story here with other characters that Jin has interacted with. And it's a neat way to wrap out an episode about separating from his wife by showing us a flashback where his wife wasn't involved, and that's a secret she doesn't know.
Yeah.
Or as far as we know, right? Because
Yeah, I believe so. And I think that actually, I think once Sun gets back from the island, because she's one of the people who leaves in the fourth season, I think she goes to visit him, actually.
Yeah. I vaguely remember this too.
But as of now in the show, I think you're right that she doesn't know that his father's still alive.
Yeah, but yeah, a really neat. But I also really like his dad.
His dad's
Just
great.
yeah, and I just love that after he tells him this thing that this clearly filled him with such shame and guilt. His dad kind of just like, yeah, nah, I probably would have done the same. Like he doesn't say that, but he gives that air, of like that is surprising. But whatever, you're my son. Hey, jump in my boat. Let's go for fit. Like
Yeah.
just like it's the kind of dad that's like, oh, this is the polar opposite of Mr. Pack.
Yeah. Well, and it does really show that it takes interacting with this professionally respected but personally repugnant man for him to be like, oh man, my dad loved me. That's all that matters. Oh shit.
Yeah. You're making me realize too, maybe my opinion on this will change. I now think Mr. Pack would have made a better Widmore as far as a.
So here's the thing. I remember way back in the day when the mercenaries were coming to the island that was a big fan theory, that it's like, okay, Sun's dad is involved with the island somehow or is trying to find Sun, and he's the big bad of the show. And it doesn't work out that way. And you're totally right. Because the thing is, we know Mr. Pack, and this is a guy who does really fit that kind of. I mean, again, I know Yakuza is in Japan, but I recently watched Black Rain by Ridley Scott, which is about Michael Douglas going over to Japan and having to deal with the Yakuza and being a total fish out of water and just being a huge jerk. But this has very much that feel of like this guy has that kind of boss. In I think the Yakuza, like the mafia dons, are called like Oyabun. But he has that feel to him, where he's just sort of like, you don't fuck with me. I'm the big bad guy. So yeah, I agree.
I totally forgot within that flashback that we also do get some clarity on the watch. That this was, for Jin, this was going to be the final thing he does for Mr. Pack and walk away. And yeah, I guess like it's not a great job of justifying the senseless beating of Michael for the watch. But in my head, I was like, oh, because if he finishes the job, it does it well, maybe Mr. Pack won't send White Suit after him. I was just trying to make a loose connection there as to why you would beat someone after you've crash landed.
So yes, yeah. Well, it's still that doesn't really make sense still. But there is a flashback, and I don't know when we get this one, but so first of all, yes, thankfully we finally get a reason as to why they were in Sydney. We find out it's for delivering the watches. But there is a flashback where Jin is still planning on escaping after they leave Sydney, and he runs into a guy in the bathroom. It's a white guy, but the guy speaks perfect Korean, and he has been sent by Mr. Pack to keep an eye on Jin and to say, I know what you're trying to do, and there's nowhere you can go where I won't find you. So I think that kind of explains it, and that Jin believes that like he and Sun are not safe anywhere, but I don't know.
Interesting. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah. But that's interesting. I totally forgot.
But the thing is, that scene, that flashback, gives credence to your theory that like he would have been a really good Widmore type opponent because he has the resources to follow these guys and find out where they are or what's going on. So Jin says he wants to start over. His dad says, so do it. After you finish this job in America, just walk away. And it definitely seems like Jin is planning to do that. And then we cut back to in the midst of the same scene as before, after seeing all of that, after seeing that Jin feels exactly the same way that Sun does, that he wants to start over, that he knows that they're not talking anymore, he says, it's too late. And he walks away. That night at the fire, Shannon tells Saeed everyone gets a new life on the island. And that is my thesis for why their relationship works. They are both starting fresh. They are taking each other as they are, with all of the things that have happened in their lives beforehand. Past his prologue. It's beautiful. We get a nice little scene between Locke and Walt. Locke asks Walt why he burned the raft. And Walt says he doesn't want to move anymore, and he likes the island. And Locke just gives his big old grin, and he's like, I like it here too.
This is the thing, though. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Locke is diabolical. This reveal to me is a bigger reveal than Son speaks English, because Locke has deliberately, despite knowing the truth, sowed the seeds of fear to unite the people and manipulate their emotions to get them to focus in on something on the island, which is why I view this as a very Ozymandias Watchmen-esque scheme, where it's like, here's an alien. Let's stop fighting across borders. Here's something we can all unite behind.
To be honest, it surprised me because I get why Locke would say that to get their focus off of Jin, because he knows who burned the raft and he wants to make sure that he can come up with a threat that will make other people leave Jin alone. By the same token, Locke is so in tune with the island that it seems like he would be interested to know who the others are and wouldn't want to start rabble-rousing and telling them, yeah, we need to think of these people as our enemy. I wonder if we're meant to look any deeper into it than Locke was just trying to get them off Jin's back, or if maybe this is something of Locke thinking, well, we have our people, and maybe what the island called me here for is to get rid of those people who don't belong on this, who don't deserve to be on this island.
From what we've seen of Locke, and especially in that, I want to say it was Hearts and Minds, he is extremely tactical with how he is choosing to manipulate people, planting certain seeds to bring them to his side. And he really does seem like he's testing the waters little by little, where, yeah, Boone was clearly ripe to be plucked for his legion. And so he did. And Walt, he continued to plant the seed there, but he knew that to get to Walt, he's got to convince Michael he's not a threat, which he's been slowly working at by doing the dog whistle and eventually saving his son from a polar bear. We've seen it with Sawyer, where he's like reinforced that, like, yeah, maybe the boar is a manifestation. I don't think you're crazy, Sawyer. The only one on the island who has told you you're not crazy. It's why there's been such resistance with Jack, where it's the one guy who he's had a very difficult time trying to get onto his side. I find this to be just more of Locke planting the seeds to build followers. To your point about whether or not he would be interested in the others or not, I feel like it's safe to say not, because Ethan, at least at this point, all that we know of him is that he is a sadistic kidnapper and murderer.
Yep.
And Locke would be like, nope, not on my island.
Yeah, when you lay it all out like that, Locke really is planting seeds, and he is manipulating people. And all of that taken together just reminds me of how one of the many things that people both criticized Lost for and also acclaimed it for was the fact that this is a very serialized show. Like, if you showed somebody this episode and didn't show them anything else, they wouldn't get half of what was going on. There's no way to get into Lost if you're not watching it from the very beginning, because each of these episodes and each of these moments builds on the ones that come before. And that is a huge reason why so many people latched onto it. It's certainly a big thing for me, because it really is this one narrative that you are watching these characters grow and develop alliances and develop rivalries. And it comes to a point where even with a bad episode, things are still happening. Like, the days on the island are going farther and farther along, and you get to the point where it's Lord of the Flies time and yada yada. I don't think I had even considered all of the things and all of the ways that Locke is twisting things to his advantage, and he really is.
Yeah, when you put them all together, it really does feel like it's very intentional that he's, despite the appearance of a good-natured man, is just diabolical.
And it makes you think about what ifs and where the show could have gone, because Locke, in a way, does become the antagonist of the show eventually, sort of. But how much more satisfying would it have been if the show had taken a different path and you actually have, instead of all this gobbledygook about Widmore and the Man in Black and all this other stuff, you just had a more simple story of half the survivors joining with Locke and half the survivors joining with Jack, and that you could still have all the supernatural stuff with it. It's just that, Locke believes that it should be one way and Jack thinks it should be another way. And yeah, instead, I mean, that's not what happens. That's definitely not what happens.
And so this is actually the only other thing that I think this is partly what made me bummed out about this episode is this episode, maybe more than all of the other ones so far, really made me think, dude, they need that sheriff. And Kate is absent.
They need the sheriff.
It was like, it's so weird how Kate is gone. It's almost like they photoshopped her out of the episode. Like, cause
it is
you
weird.
Could almost...
She gets that one little scene with Jack where they're sitting on the beach watching the two of them fight. You get the scene where she's talking to Sun in the tent, and that's about it.
You could have had someone like Kate eventually rise to be the sheriff leader, and Locke as the church chaos.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
As things are devolving to Lord of the Flies, it really was it felt like the moment, and it passed.
Yeah.
And that bummed me out a little bit.
Temporarily. I feel like the storm has passed over us for now, but it's still hovering in the distance.
Well, as I'm sure is the next plot point on your note, which is that the CD player died.
So Jin joins Michael on the beach, and he comes with bamboo to help build a new raft, and he says the word boat. And it's very clear that Jin is going to be the fourth person to get on the raft. We get the Hurley music montage. It's set to Delicate by Damien Rice. And I should point out here for our younger listeners, if they exist, Damien Rice was the shit in 2004, 2005. My senior year of high school, it was just on repeat. It was, and what is it, The Blower's Daughter. I mean, I still like Damien Rice, don't get me wrong. It's just hearing Damien Rice calls back all of that era of music. We see Shannon and Saeed eating fruit together, presumably after spending the night together. Or maybe this is night. I can't quite tell if we're supposed to be early morning or dusk. We get a beautiful shot of Sun walking out on the beach. Not just the shot of her wrap blowing away, but also that the light coming over the mountain. My God, Hawaii is a beautiful, beautiful land.
And this is like a good example of a not gratuitous.
Yes, I was
shot.
Thinking about. Yeah, it goes to show that Sun is freed in a way, and that she is. It's a great bookend to the episode because the episode begins with her being in the bikini and being forced to cover up, and now she's alone, but she is allowed to let it go, to be herself. And it's obvious, but it's good. It's very good.
Yeah.
Charlie and Claire sharing a drink on the beach, and Hurley's Discman dies. It is sad, it is funny, and it is ominous.
And I like it as a Hurley thing, too, because since he is such a bundle of joy, it's like the first time we see something, certainly not the last, first time we see something bad happen to Hurley, and he still kind of takes it on the chin a little bit, where he's just kind of like, oh, man. Like,
I was surprised, actually, that he says son of a bitch.
Is that what he says?
He does. Yeah, I didn't catch it. Again, something I didn't catch the first time, but he just goes, son of a bitch. And you know what I forgot to mention is when Jin goes into the energy secretary's house, his daughter is watching a news story with Hurley on the TV.
Oh, is she?
Yep.
Oh, my God. That's the crossover stuff I love, and I missed it.
Yes. And I believe Hurley's episode is next. So it's a great, I love, Easter eggs At this point, Easter eggs are just a thing that are in every movie all the time. But, once again, showing my age here, for all of you young whippersnappers listening to this podcast, if you indeed still listen to podcasts, and old men like me, once upon a time, having a little thing in the background like that as an Easter egg was a big friggin' deal. And the fact that you could notice it made you feel special. Little stuff like that, like seeing, it's a real blink and you'll miss it thing. He's there, and I believe it's the same shot that we get to see later on of when like news crews are following him around for winning the lottery or something. But yeah, it's nice. Those, like you said, those little crossover moments are really cool.
Well, and I really like it when, and already in the first season they've been spotty with it, but when an episode ends on the character who's going to lead the next episode, I should have picked up on that. I didn't realize that Hurley's episode was next, but yes, awesome way to end it. And then doubly awesome because I imagine this is where we're going to learn that, oh yeah, Hurley, not so lucky. But like having his music player die as kind of like the button that's going to lead into his episode, that's really cool.